Okay, let's look at stem changers, verbs that have a change in the stem. Now in chapter 3, we just learned how to conjugate regular verbs. There was a stem and we added an ending. But there are verbs where that stem can change in the conjugation. And one group of these stem changers is the stem changing verbs where the O of the stem changes to UE. Let's take a look at these. So, what are some facts about stem changing verbs? First of all, like all verbs in Spanish, stem changer infinitives have one of three of the following endings. So again, all verbs in Spanish, even stem changers, either end in AR, ER, or IR in the infinitive form. So when we go to conjugate stem changing verbs, they're going to have the regular endings that we learned when we conjugated regular verbs. And this is good review. You should have already learned these. Let's take a look at the different verb endings and the subject pronouns. So for yo, the endings for AR, ER, and IR verbs, the endings that we add onto the stem would be an O. For two, what endings do we add onto the stem? Well, there they are. For AR verbs, it's an AS. For ER and IR verbs, it's an ES. What about the L, ella, usted form? What ending do we add on to the stem for regular verbs? An A for ER verbs, an E and for ER and IR verbs. And then our plural subject pronouns. What endings do we add on to the stems? For nosotros, we add on amos, and for ER verbs, we add on emos, EMOS, and for IR verbs, we add on imos, IMOS. Finally, what about ellos, ustedes? What ending do we add on when we conjugate a verb? What ending do we add on to the stem? An AN for AR verbs and EN for ER and IR verbs. So again, when we go to conjugate stem changer verbs, we're going to get our stem, and we have to figure out what that stem will be, but the endings will depend upon the subject pronoun and whether it's an AR, ER, or IR verb. Okay, another important fact about stem changing verbs is that they have two stems. Up until now, when we have regular verbs, we only had one stem, but all stem changers have two stems. So let's look at this. The first stem is formed by dropping the AR, ER, or IR ending. And that's what we did when we conjugated regular verbs. We just learned that earlier in chapter 3. So we're going to have our original stem that we all know and we have all known how to form. We just dropped the AR, ER, or IR ending. But with stem changers, we have a second stem. And the second stem is formed by making the following vowel changes within the original stem. So the O of that first stem changes, and specifically the O changes to UE, to we, UE. Now here are some common O to UE verbs, and you should all know these verbs, be familiar with them, what they mean, and you should know how to conjugate them. But let's look at them. So the first verb here is almorzar, and it means to have lunch. So what is the stem of almorzar? I drop the AR and I get almorz. You should all be able to do that. But now, I told you stem changers have a second stem. What is the second stem? Well, as you can see, the O goes to UE. So if I change the O of the stem to UE, I get almuerz. You see that change? I have a second stem. What about dormir? Dormir is an important verb. It means to sleep. The first stem, we all know how to form. I just dropped the IR ending, dorm. What about the second stem? the O changes to UE. So I get duerm, duerm. The next verb, poder, very important verb. The verb to be able to, the verb that says can. It's very awkward in English, the infinitive to be able to, but in English we really use it more as can. So poder, let's take a look at it. The first stem that we all know how to form is pod. You just drop the ER ending. But now I have to get the second stem. The O goes to UE. My new stem is puede. Puede. And then let's look at another stem changer. O to UE. Volver. Volver means to return. So the first stem is volv. And now I have to, the O will change to UE. And my new stem, we can't see it there, but it is vuelva. Vuelve. And again, these are in your book. But let's move on. So what about the placement of the stem change? Where, when we're conjugating a verb, is there a stem change? Okay. When I'm conjugating a verb with a subject pronoun, which subject pronoun requires a stem change? And there's a very simple, straightforward rule. Let's look at it. Let's conjugate the verb dormir, okay, with the subject pronouns. So it's yo duermo. So notice there's a stem change with yo. There's always a stem change with yo. So when I go to conjugate yo, I don't take the first stem, I take the second stem, the stem change stem, and I add on my regular ending. Oh, duermo. What about tu? There's always a stem change in tu. So I don't use the original stem dorm, I use duerm, and I put on my ending for IR verbs in tu. Duermes, tu duermes. What about the ella usted form? Yes, there is a stem change. There's always a stem change in the ella usted form. Duerme. Now look at nosotros. It's starred. It's starred because there is never a stem change in nosotros. So we use the original stem. We conserve that original stem. And that is why stem changers have two stems. So it's nosotros dormimos. Okay. Also, there is no stem change in vosotros. Okay, which I have mentioned here. Finally, let's look at the other plural subject pronoun, ellos, they, or ustedes, you all. There is a stem change, so it's duermen. Duermen, they sleep, or ustedes duermen, you all sleep. With all of this in mind, let's go ahead and do some present tense conjugations of some O to UE stem changing verbs. So we have yo almorzar. I want to say I have lunch or I eat lunch. Will there be a stem change? Yes, there always is a stem change with yo. What about nosotros? I want to say we have lunch. Is there a stem change? Never. There's never a stem change with nosotros. We use the original stem. Nosotros almorzamos. We have lunch. Here's our verb poder, to be able to. So I want to say you can. So will there be a stem change? Yes. There always is a stem change with tu puedes. Tu puedes. Let's look at 4. We want to say nosotros, we, poder, can. So will there be a stem change when we conjugate poder? No, there's never a stem change with nosotros. It's nosotros podemos, we can. Now, what about yo? I want to say I can. Is there a stem change? Yes, there always is a stem change with yo, so it's yo puedo. Now let's look at quien. I want to ask, here's my verb dormir, an important verb, to sleep. and I want to say who is sleeping or who sleeps. Okay, will there be a stem change? Yes. ¿Quién, in terms of our subject pronouns, is a singular subject pronoun. It's one of our singular, and it's where the él, ella, usted conjugation is. So there will be a stem change. ¿Quién duerme? I use the él, ella conjugation. And finally, nosotros. I want to say we are sleeping. Will there be a stem change? No, there never is a stem change with nosotros. Nosotros dormimos. Let's do a few more up here. Here we're going to ask some questions. Poder is an incredible verb. We use it a lot in Spanish as in English. We can use it to ask questions. We do all the time in English. We can do it in Spanish. So here the question is, I put yo in parentheses because I want you to conjugate the verb in the yo form. Here the person is asking, can I speak? We can double up poder with verbs. Okay, we can use it with other verbs. It's often used with other verbs. Can I speak? Can I play? Can I run? So notice when you double up poder with another verb, you don't conjugate the second verb. So here we want to ask the question. I start out with an upside down question mark. Can I hablar? Can I speak? So will there be a stem change when I go to conjugate poder in the yo form? Yes. Puedo hablar. Can I speak? Here's another question with poder. And this time it's a two question. You want to ask somebody, can you dance? Okay, will there be a stem change? Yes. There always is in the two form. Puedes bailar. 10. Here is a cuando question. Cuando is a question word. You should all know it by now. When. Volver means to return. Okay, so we want to ask, when do they return, or when are they returning? Is there a stem change with the they form? Yes, there always is. Cuando vuelven. Look at 11. We want to ask a at what time question, and it's at what time do you sleep? Okay. Will there be a stem change when we conjugate dormir? Yes, because it's to a qué hora duermes. And finally, here we're using poder again with another verb. Notice the second verb, hacer, is never conjugated. So what are we asking here? ¿Qué poder hacer ellos? What can they do? Hacer means to make or do. So will there be a stem change when we conjugate poder with ellos? Yes, there always is. So, ¿qué pueden hacer ellos? What can they do? Now, this question is a little awkward for the English speaker, but in Spanish, when you ask a question, you can put the subject all the way to the end of the sentence. ¿Qué pueden hacer ellos? In English, we would ask it more, ¿qué pueden ellos hacer? But in Spanish here, we have two verbs going on. We're going to put our subject all the way to the end of this sentence. Okay, that's it for our stem changing verbs, where the O of the stem goes to UE.